Oh yes, Peloton Bike Plus versus Yosuda. Today we have another comparison that nobody asked for and probably nobody cares about, but that doesn't mean I'm not gonna do it. This Yosuda bike just happens to be the #1 best-selling indoor cycling bike on Amazon. I bought it for about $340 and the Peloton Bike Plus costs about $2,500. The Yosuda has a red resistance knob that you can use here to adjust your resistance. And the Peloton Bike Plus also has a little red resistance knob here that you can use to adjust your resistance. The Yosuda has the flywheel on the front of the bike and it weighs 35 pounds according to the Amazon listing. And the Peloton Bike Plus has the flywheel on the front, and from everything I can find, this is a 38-pound flywheel. And the difference between these two numbers is only 3 pounds. The Yosuda is belt driven and the Peloton Bike Plus is also belt driven. However, unlike the Peloton Bike Plus, the Yosuda uses a friction resistance pad. It's this little felt pad right here, and you turn this resistance knob and it brings the pad down and it applies resistance, and it just makes a little bit of noise there. And the result of that is the drivetrain, as you add on resistance due to the flywheel and friction resistance system here, it just really does not feel as smooth as the Peloton Bike Plus. So the Peloton Bike Plus uses a digital magnetic resistance system where you turn this knob up here and it lowers the magnets down and brings them closer to the flywheel. And there's a magnet stack on each side of the flywheel, and it really applies the resistance in a very smooth and linear way that feels very good when you're riding the bike. And the Yosuda bike has a little mini screen up here that gives you some metrics here, like your time, speed, distance, calories, and odometer. But the good news is, if you do want to use this screen, you don't have to pay any monthly fee to do so. The Peloton Bike Plus has a little bit nicer screen up here that rotates and gives you some metrics, you know, such as your power output, as well as your cadence, how fast you're pedaling, as well as the resistance number. And I'm turning the resistance and it'll show you your resistance on a scale of 0 to 100. And you can also get your heart rate if you have your heart rate monitor on using the Peloton Bike Plus. You do have to pay $39 per month to use this screen. So I did make a full video review on the Yosuda bike. I'll put a little card to it, a link up here or down in the description box if you want to learn more about the drivetrain on the Yosuda. But really, the drivetrain, the resulting drivetrain, because of the way the flywheel and internal components on this bike and the friction resistance system, it really just does not compare at all to the Peloton Bike Plus in terms of feel and the way it feels to ride the bike. Additionally, as you add on more and more resistance on the Yosuda bike, it just gets less and less linear and feels less and less smooth as you increase the resistance. The flywheel mass on this Yosuda, I believe, is just not enough mass, or there's just something going on in this bike that results in the drivetrain feel just not feeling very smooth as you add on more and more resistance. On the Yosuda bike, you get a few basic metrics such as timer, which is probably accurate. On the other hand, over on the Peloton Bike Plus, this bike does measure your resistance, it measures your cadence, and it even gives you your power output, which is not measured by a strain gauge. However, there is a sophisticated calibration process that happens on this bike to give you a relatively accurate power output display, which I should mention, power output is considered to be the gold standard in terms of metrics for measuring your workout. So probably if you're actually wondering what the difference is between the Peloton Bike Plus and the Yosuda bike, hopefully this is clearing up a little bit about the similarities and differences here. And probably what you're considering doing is adding a tablet up here onto this little device holder, in which you can run the Peloton digital app, and you could do a DIY Peloton with the Yosuda. This is not my #1 recommendation. Browse my channel for other videos if you're just getting your foot in the door here and found the Yosuda and you're wondering if this is a good Peloton alternative. And if you do add a tablet, you could put on a heart rate monitor. You could get your heart rate up on an iPad. You could get your cadence if you put the Wahoo cadence sensor down there on the pedals, and you could make this thing work. Let's talk about a few of the benefits of the Yosuda. Some people might actually like this seat because it is so wide and squishy. It actually has some springs under there. And you know, a lot of people who are looking as a beginner for a comfortable saddle, you might actually like this thing. Although in my opinion, I believe that this saddle is just far too wiggly and squishy. And you know, it's just not my personal favorite saddle, but everybody does have their own saddle preferences. As comparison, the Peloton Bike Plus saddle over here is much more narrow and firm, and a lot of people who are new to indoor cycling really do not like this saddle at all. And the first thing they do is get you know, a gel cover to cover the seat. You could also, you know, get some bike shorts, some padded bike shorts to make this saddle more comfortable. These are the pedals that come on the Yosuda. They are a cage style on one side, and the other side does not have a clip-in option. It's just like a normal pedal. So this is very beginner friendly. However, the downside is, since there is no SPD clip-in or any sort of clip-in option on the other side here, you would need to swap these pedals out if you want to clip in eventually. These are not the stock pedals that come on the Peloton Bike Plus, but the Peloton bikes do come with clip-in style pedals, just a different style pedal that we chose not to use. And we chose these pedals because they are SPD compatible, and that's the shoes that we ride with personally. You've probably seen these team shoes. They're very popular. It has the SPD clip in there on the bottom. It's a good looking shoe, and you can actually walk around in this shoe like a normal shoe when you're done riding the bike. The stock pedals that come on the Peloton Bike Plus clip into this style shoe and this style cleat on the bottom. And as you can see, it just has that big bulky thing down there on the bottom. So you really can't walk around on these. And also they're just really difficult to unclip from when you're riding the bike. This pedal may actually be a little bit more efficient at putting down power, because the bottom of the shoe is very hard and rigid, and there's not much flex there. However, if you are considering whether you should buy the #1 best-selling Amazon bike for about $340, you're probably not that concerned about putting down efficient power just quite yet. You do get a single water bottle holder here on the Yosuda, and it's just fine. The Peloton Bike Plus comes with a dual water bottle holder setup up here on the front of the bike. And the handlebars here on the Yosuda, just careful on this one here. It'll kind of stab your hand a little bit here on this piece of plastic, just right here on your main riding position. But you do get a few other riding positions along the sides here. The handlebars on this Yosuda are a little bit weird compared to a lot of the other bikes I have, but you know, they work. The Peloton Bike Plus handlebars are much thicker and beefier, and a much nicer material to grab onto and grip, and there's nothing that stabs your hands when you grab onto the handlebars. There is a little 3.5 millimeter audio jack right here, but you probably won't need to use that because this bike is Bluetooth compatible, so you can put in your AirPods or any sort of wireless earbuds. And then also there's an awesome speaker system on the Peloton Bike Plus with subwoofers on the back and forward facing speakers, and it's a really nice audio system. Obviously on the Yosuda there is no audio system to speak of, but if you add your own tablet or run the Peloton digital app, you could play whatever speakers you want through that. The Yosuda bike does have the Peloton Beat in one area a little bit here, not the mobility wheels. The mobility wheels over here are much better on the Peloton Bike Plus. These ones are just, you know, cheap. They work. I've moved this bike around very easily. But in terms of the adjustability feet, so on the bottom of both these bikes there are feet that you can adjust in case your floor is not level. But on the Yosuda there are these little knobs on the side that you can adjust the feet. So in the case you need to do that, the Yosuda is a little bit easier to adjust. The Yosuda bike isn't really good for tall people because the seat doesn't really come up quite as high as it needs to be. I'm 6'5" and this thing doesn't really quite work for me. It's on the max height of 8, and there are holes you need to click into which are spaced pretty far apart. So in terms of raising and lowering the seat on this bike, you know, it's gonna be, you're not really gonna get micro adjustments there, and you're probably not gonna be able to get it dialed in to precisely where you need it to. But you know, this is definitely a very beginner bike. Also on the front up here, you get these same adjustment styles. There's only 5 different levels here that you can click into. And yeah, there's holes you need to click into. No adjustability in terms of moving the handlebars forwards and backwards. I do have bikes back here that can do that, but the Peloton Bike Plus or the Yosuda cannot move handlebars forwards and backwards. As comparison, the Peloton Bike Plus does not have holes you need to click into, and you can raise and lower the handlebars quite a bit more, and the seat also goes up to a very high maximum height. I'm 6'5" and easily fit on this bike. It's not a max height even. So it's really good for tall people and for short people. So now what I'm gonna do is just kind of hop on both these bikes back to back and share my opinions and thoughts on the drivetrains. All right, so starting over here on the Yosuda, comparing the #1 best-selling indoor cycling bike on Amazon to the king of indoor cycling. How do they stack up in terms of drivetrain feel? Well, let's find out. So at minimum resistance, you know, it's just a free spinning flywheel. It works, you know, like this thing is a bike, it's basic. When there's no resistance, there's no resistance, you know, it feels fine. When you start adding on resistance, it starts making a little bit of noise because, you know, it's a friction resistance bike. And, you know, it's fine. If you didn't know any better and you got on this bike and rode the Yosuda, you can get a good workout on it. You know, it's not probably the worst bike ever made. So if you're buying a bike for exercise and not really for, you know, like training, you can definitely get on this bike and you can get a good workout for sure. You can put on some resistance, feel a little bit of vibration coming up through the frame and the handlebars. And the drivetrain, it works, you know? It really works. It's not my favorite bike, obviously. This is a very inexpensive bike. One thing you start to notice about the Yosuda is when you start adding on resistance, the drivetrain doesn't feel as smooth anymore as a magnetic resistance bike. And that's just because the flywheel is making contact with the friction pad, and somehow it just does not translate into like a really good feeling drivetrain. But with the friction resistance, you can add on a lot of resistance and you can get a good workout. So this thing will actually crank up to a higher maximum resistance than the Peloton Bike Plus, and that's because it is a physical friction resistance. However, it doesn't really feel that smooth. It gets really choppy as you add on a lot of resistance. So yeah, that's just kind of my feelings and thoughts on the drivetrain of this bike. At the lower resistances, it works. You know, it's actually fine. It just makes a little bit of noise. And you can definitely get a good workout on the Yosuda. One thing I should point out is the felt pad on this bike is going to wear out over time and you'll need to replace it. So over here on the Peloton Bike Plus, the difference is night and day. That's really all I can really say. The drivetrain on minimum resistance feels great. You know, also just kind of rotates freely. As you add on resistance, you can add on resistance much easier, or I should say much quicker on the Peloton Bike Plus because of the electronic controlled resistance. Is controlled by a motor that changes it for you, and it moves very quickly. So that's 100, that's 0 or 10. So I mean, you can change it from min to max very quickly. And then also this bike is like really quiet. It's not completely silent, but it is very quiet, and since it's magnetic resistance and belt driven, there's basically no maintenance on the Peloton Bike Plus, no pads you need to change, and no obnoxious noise. And since it's magnetic, as you crank up that resistance, it feels very smooth as you add on more and more resistance. So it feels just as smooth at low resistance as it does at higher resistances. So I'm on resistance 51 right now. And let me just crank it to 100. So the max resistance on the Peloton Bike Plus is not as much as the Yosuda, but honestly, I never ride this thing like over probably resistance 70 in a normal aerobic training class anyway. So, I mean, the main point is the magnetic resistance feels very smooth as you add on more and more resistance. The Yosuda friction resistance feels a little bit more choppy and less smooth as you add on more and more resistance. Also, another point I should make is even though the Yosuda claims to have a flywheel mass of 35 pounds, and this flywheel is believed to be 38 pounds on this bike, that's a 3-pound difference, not much. But the difference in the way the momentum feels through the drivetrain, like when I go to stop pedaling, is huge. There's a huge difference. And what that momentum really translates to is when you're pedaling at a higher cadence and getting out of the saddle and riding out of the saddle like this, it translates into a smooth feeling cadence as you ride. Coming back over here onto the Yosuda, just feeling out that momentum of the flywheel. Honestly, I mean, I'm not going to say this flywheel is not 35 pounds, but there's something going on in this drivetrain that the cadence, like when I stop pedaling like that, it's just not the same momentum that like carries you through to the next pedal stroke. So it's really kind of something that's hard to explain in words, but the feel between the drivetrain on the Peloton Bike Plus and the Yosuda bike is night and day. Completely different animals, obviously completely different price points as well, but just understand that there's a lot more to it than just the screen and the magnetic resistance and the look and the brand. There's other stuff going on inside of this bike that translates into a far different feel. So if you want to get a Peloton bike, but it's just too much money, the Yosuda bike is a definitely cheaper option that you can do the Peloton digital app on and get a somewhat kind of watered down Peloton experience on a cheaper bike. It's not my number one favorite inexpensive bike. I have a lot of bike reviews back there if you haven't seen any other of my less expensive DIY Peloton kind of bikes. It's not my number one recommended bike, but you can definitely get a great workout on this bike. I can tell you firsthand, when I got on this bike, when I first got it and tested out that max resistance, it is very high. My legs felt sore the next day. I felt tired because you can crank that resistance up and turn this thing into a leg machine, take your workout into the anaerobic level very easily when you add on resistance. The Yosuda bike does actually work decently well for, kind of like a higher cadence, low resistance workout. So if you don't really plan on adding a lot of resistance on in your ride and you just wanted something to turn your legs over and have a light, easy resistance, the Yosuda bike can work. It's not the greatest bike again, but $340-ish on Amazon. You could buy this thing. It'll show up to your door within like a couple days. When I ordered it, I think it came in like 2 or 3 days, just like every other bike I've bought on Amazon. And the Peloton Bike Plus, obviously, this bike just pretty much speaks for itself. This is a great machine, but it is very expensive, $2,500, and then also basically $40 per month just to be able to use the classes and the stuff up on the screen. So if I haven't talked to you how to buy in the Yosuda yet, I do have a link below this video, and if you do buy through that link, it does help support this channel. But again, I'm not trying to convince you to buy the Yosuda. I do think that there are a lot of other good options out there, so browse my channel and check out those reviews and videos. But if I have not talked to you out of buying it and you're gonna buy it anyway, I do have a link below this video. So thanks for watching my most ridiculous comparison yet. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in my next video.